Good morning and welcome to Huddle for Success. I'm Dwayne Gibbs alongside my partner Mark Bruce, the Hall of Famer. We come to you every Monday with a full episode of helping you not only in business, in life, and also personal transformation. And so we have a special guest today. Before that, let me start by saying good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Dwayne. I am so looking forward to this episode. You've told me a lot about how you met Jim, and I can't wait to dive in.
Yeah, so I met Jim Saturday. And just listening to his story, I felt like it would be a plus having him on this episode of our podcast. And I think you, the listener, will really enjoy his background. And I think that it's going to be a really good episode. And, we'll introduce him, get him on, and let's start peppering him with questions. And so, Jim, good morning. Everybody, I want to introduce you to Jim Henley. Jim, welcome.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Glad to be here. Thanks
Yeah,
for inviting
glad to
me.
have you.
Yes. So,
So I met you Saturday and we were talking and I was really, first of all, I appreciate your service. You spent 20 years in the Navy, correct?
Yeah, 23. Yes.
23 in the Navy. And first of all, again, appreciate your service and really glad to hear your story and what you do. And so I thought we could unravel some of that with the starting of your nonprofit organization, your coaching program, and we'll just go from there. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and what you have going on?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I did 23 years in the Navy. I got a ROTC scholarship to go to the University of Chapel Hill, which is where I, wanted to attend growing up in Charlotte. And so that was my way to get there and pay for it. And really didn't know much about the Navy, to be honest. My dad had served 4 years in Vietnam, but didn't talk about it much. And, I kind of knew it was there, but he wasn't really, pushing me to do military or anything. But it really took kind of grabbed onto it in high school. We had a ROTC program and just the leadership aspect of it, was I was drawn to and quickly kind of became a student of leadership and felt like I had some of those qualities and wanted to improve them and started down that path. So 4 years later, got a scholarship, went to the University of North Carolina and started that journey. Really not knowing, actually, really wanting to be a Marine. To be honest, I knew a couple of Marines in the ROTC high school program, and their discipline really appealed to me. Again, didn't know a whole lot about it. Applied to the scholarship and found out I had applied for a Navy scholarship, and there was a separate application for a Marine scholarship.
Hmm.
And so I spent the 4 years I was in college in the ROTC program trying to improve my package so that I could apply for a Marine scholarship. But my freshman year, my grades, I suffered, struggled a lot with math for different reasons. And so that it put me behind and I never really could put together a competitive package my senior year. I was all ready to go to Marine OCS, had been working out with the gunny and all the guys that were Marine options
wow.
and then didn't get accepted. So I was really lost. I was like, what am I going to do now? So long story short, I wound up as a logistics officer in the Navy. Didn't know anything about logistics or what they did in the Navy.
Mhm.
Um, but because it's just kind of the way selection went and at that time, they were I got accepted to that program. So 4 years of or 6 months of logistics school and off to the Navy I went and did my first tour in Sasebo, Japan on a ship, which was a ton of fun, a great place to start. It was a big ship, so there was lots of other supply officers, lots of people to learn from. Really a great opportunity. And then went overseas to Italy because my roommate on the ship had come from Italy. He's like, "Oh, you got to go to Italy." So went to Italy for a couple of years and then came back to San Diego and was part of a brand new startup command that was a mix of SEALs and EOD and Marine Recon And so that was a really fun group and a taste of what we call expeditionary logistics. And I was hooked. I was kind of in that community where I wanted to be, just more physical. We did base swims and runs and things like that. So, but I also at that time was very involved in our church program, and I was doing young adult ministry and felt the calling to go into ministry. And again, while I was doing fine in the Navy, I didn't have a, a vision for the future. I didn't have really even mentors that were pulling me to stay or do this. And so I stepped out and went into ministry, but I stayed in the Navy Reserves. I affiliated with the SEAL Team Reserve Unit because
Oh,
of
wow.
my connections there.
Nice.
And then I met my wife in San Diego. Kind of we dated there, and then she married under the pretense that she was marrying a pastor. And then little did she know, right? So we did campus ministry at the University of Arizona for a couple of years. It was a great
Nice.
experience working with college kids and mentoring. It was kind of a lot of the same skills, kind of teaching and mentoring and kind of life skills and faith, developing their faith. And then 9/11 happened in 2001 and pretty much changed the entire NSW reserve organization, where it used to be, to be honest, kind of a joke, where SEALs would kind of hang out and do barbecues on the weekends and have fun and go to the range. It just wasn't, because what's a reserve SEAL team going to do? Like, they don't have the training to operate as a unit. It's just a bunch of guys, a lot of them keeping their dive pay active and things. So they changed that entire organization to become a support infrastructure for the active duty guys who were now going forward into Iraq and Afghanistan. So yeah, we showed up at a drill weekend one time in like November of 2004, and they were like, "Hey, they're coming out with a list of names in 2 weeks. If your name's not on that list, it will be on the list in 6 months." I was like, "Oh." I called my wife. I was like, "Hey, honey, we need to get our will updated and probably put the house up for sale." So we did. We sold the house, moved to San Diego. 2 weeks later, I was mobilized, and 6 months later, I deployed with the SEAL teams to Iraq. So that kind of changed the trajectory of our, life
Yeah.
together. She started learning quickly what Navy life was like and rank
Learned
structures
quickly that
and
you weren't
yeah,
going to be in a church every single
yeah,
Sunday.
Yeah.
yeah, that there was going to be a lot of separation time, for
Yeah.
us. And she it's funny because she just had no clue, about the
Yeah.
military. And so because I wore fatigues, she would say things like, "Yeah, he's going to play Army this weekend," like that's how foreign it all was to her. So I remember getting a chief's initiation book and leaving it in the bathroom for her to read, like read about the rank structures and the organizations and things like that. So she could start to not sound like she didn't know what was going on. So yeah, so we kind of came back, and at that time, let's see, I guess about a year later, after that deployment, the Navy was short of supply officers in my rank. So they were looking for reservists to come on active duty full time. Put in an application, got selected, and then I was kind of in for the rest of my career. I was going to be able to stay active duty until retirement, and so I kind of just stayed in that expeditionary field as long as I could. I had to kind of pretend like I was doing something else, but they actually called me back in to work with the Seabees after I left the SEAL teams. And so that's just what I knew. And I had a lot of experience where most supply officers had none. It's nothing at all like ship supply corps traditional things. So yeah, so next thing you know, we're done with 23 years total, retired and had to make that transition of, figuring out, well, what do we do now?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm
so
sure a lot of your clients are like that.
yeah, it's actually more of something I do on the side is through my networking. I meet a lot of people that are transitioning. Just talked to a guy on Twitter this morning who's, announced that he's retiring after 20 years. And I was like, hey, feel free to jump on a call, we'll talk. And, it's just more helping people through that, because it is a huge transition. A lot of people come at it from, and everybody comes kind of from a different angle. Me, I had already been out. So, so I had already made that transition once, but now I was making it at a much different stage in life, with kids and family and trying to figure out, how to pay the bills and like how to keep that same quality of life and things like that. So yeah, so a lot of it just depends on what your angle is. Some people are done and they're done. Like they just want to buy a small house and fish for the rest of their life. Okay, that's pretty easy. There's still
Yeah.
some things that you want to make sure you're still connected and you still have people that you can, kind of have that camaraderie with because it's important. If you try to go
Yeah.
cold turkey with that, I think you're gonna, struggle. Again, depending on what your experience was in the military, but for this era, most of us have been to Iraq or supported in that in theater and stuff. So there's some things that go along with that are specific. But yeah, so made the transition. I'd gotten my MBA while I was in the Navy, thanks to the Navy, and that's really where my interest lie. I didn't want to do the government, GS thing. I wanted to kind of grow and learn more about business. I took a job as a sales manager for a company that was largely veteran run. And so I'm still working with veteran, with the military and with people that had been in service. And so it felt great because I still had that camaraderie, but it allowed me to peek behind the curtain into a fairly large, corporation that, had the whole CEO and the VPs and the sales process and the marketing and I felt like I was kind of a spy in that from that perspective while I
Mm.
was doing my job. I was learning from the organization a lot and some things good, some things not so good, and you just kind of put that all in your cap. And we moved to Texas in 2020, and then some new leadership came in and didn't understand why I was in Texas when my team was in San Diego, and so they wanted to do something different with the sales position. So I transitioned, and that's when I started my business coaching, and I had built a networking group there in Texas and was a part of a master network group, which is, basically built to help small business owners grow their business. And so, on the one hand, I was trying to pitch that I could help small business owners. On the other hand, this program was designed to kind of do the same thing. But again, it gave me a way to kind of compare and contrast and see, okay, the networking group is talking about this, but what are small business owners really struggling with? A good veteran friend of mine was the company had a roofing company and gave me my first shot to, come help and coach him and work with him. And which again, just let me jump in feet first into what is it that he needs, what does he need to help him grow his business. And so it was kind of working through, some of those theories like that you can read in almost any book on strategies to grow your business, and then dealing with the reality of that. And what is it like really from the business owner perspective, who's, constantly answering the cell phone, like running, 10 different things at one time. And how do you help someone like that? How do you what is it that they really need? And so that allowed me again to kind of flush out the strategies that I think work across different, so helping over 50 different business owners work through their different, marketing strategies, their different markets themselves, how they position themselves. And a lot of it, kind of correlates with your book. A lot of it is mindset. A lot of it is perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, a lot of times it's really just getting your head above water so that you can see far enough out to create a vision and then figure out what you need to be doing in order to get there. And that really is the biggest challenge. And to be honest, that came right from the military. For me as a senior officer, I saw senior officers struggle with the exact same thing because the emails never stop and the phone calls never stop, and the crises never go away or calm down. Like there's always something, sailors always getting into trouble, or something like that. So I would get really frustrated sometimes by that and see like senior people who couldn't look up from their desk to talk to another senior officer. And I was like, well, hold on,
Right.
there's a problem here. Like if you can't pick your head up and look out across your organization and have a strategy and work with your senior people to delegate some of those issues. And so that's a big part of the discussion we have is we talk a lot about delegating, what proper delegation looks like.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just throwing tasks at people, it's making sure they're effectively trained to do the task, make sure they know what success looks like, make sure they understand, what the full range of their, right and left limits are so that they're empowered to take some of this load off of your plate.
Yeah, I'm sure your military experience helped a lot with that because
Yeah.
I had a business partner who served in the Army,
Okay.
and he learned all of those things you just talked about from the military, which did translate really well to small
Right.
business. So
Right. Right.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
because it's I think big organizations, a lot of that's kind of built in. But a small organization, you have to really be intentional to create it.
Yes.
And it can be difficult depending on finances and how you see things, because typically you don't start there, right? You start with
Yeah.
a pretty small, very lean organization, and you're just doing what you're doing because you do it well,
Yep.
right? And then you realize,
Until you don't.
right, until you stop doing it well because you've gotten bigger than you can actually handle yourself.
Sure.
Right.
Yep.
And you're now outside where you're the constraint, as the business owner. Your time and energy and your ability to manage it all is now the limiting factor of your organizational growth.
You
Yep.
know, what I have found is that a business owner's vision is different than their employees.
Right.
And so that if the vision is not the same across the board, and I think a lot of owners don't take the time to listen to their employees' vision,
Right.
because just because it's their vision, that's all fine and good, but sometimes you have to check that ego and leave it at the door, because if you're hiring capable and competent people that you feel there was a chord that struck with you to where you felt like you hired them on, but I'm going to put them in this position, doesn't mean that Sally needs to be the receptionist. She may be better suited in a different area within your business, and
Sure.
being able to have an open mind. And so I think, I mean, you lead a good point about
Mhm.
that they're not able to see over the dash. And I'm worried about running this business, but
Yeah.
where are my employees' vision? Where do they line up with my vision?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and when you look at any large organization, the CEO, like if they're doing their job well, largely it's just casting the vision over and over
Right.
in different ways through different means. but it's doing that vision casting such that everybody in the organization can grab on to the same vision and pull towards the same goals,
Yes.
which again is really hard to do if you're head down into the day-to-day grind. It can be difficult.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
And
sure.
so, I think just the act of hiring or talking to a coach is, that first step in starting to realize I need to I need to get my head above the organization. I need to look further out. I need some help, somewhere to get unstuck, as you talk about often, right? So
Yeah, for sure.
when you get stuck in the routine and the busyness,
Yeah.
it's just very, very challenging that way. So by taking an hour to sit down and talk about it, almost everybody immediately goes, oh, like you just have the light bulb moment. They'll say, oh, I I just am not thinking that far ahead. I'm not I don't have a strategy, you know.
Right. They've never taken the time to think because they're
Sure.
so busy doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe they do, but having the thought up here, like I said, our brains are kind of like spaghetti, right? It gets tied in knots, but when you speak it, it goes through a logic filter
Yes.
and it becomes clearer. And then when you speak it kind of and you have it hurt, maybe spoken back to you, it goes through another logic filter and you start going, oh, that's the problem. I haven't explained this, or I haven't, necessarily told my team what I think. Like sometimes it's just that simple. Like, have you had that discussion? I know it may be a difficult discussion, but have you had it in any form with your, challenging employee? No, I haven't. I've been avoiding it, right? Like, or
Yeah.
been I've been throwing someone else at the problem or whatever it is. So,
We do a whole session on what is the mind. People, what does your mind look like?
mm,
And most people say they identify the brain. Well, your
mhm,
mind's not the brain. Your brain's the brain. What's your mind?
right.
And we do a whole segment and go down a road. Mark does that really well and talk about you can identify what your car is, how many miles you have on it, what your front door looks like, what your tractor in the garage looks like, but how can you explain what your mind is?
Hmm.
People,
Right.
they don't
Hmm.
know what their mind looks like. And
Right.
it's all in this thinking process,
Hmm.
just like what you talked about. And it's so important that
Yeah.
people don't go down that road and think about that. And,
Right.
when
Right.
they have to go look over the dash or they're so up to their eyeballs and just tunnel vision of their business,
Right.
looking beyond that just
Yeah.
doesn't they just can't correlate with it. It doesn't resonate with them. So
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about who your avatar is. The people you said this morning that you talked to somebody on X and so
Mm.
on Twitter X, but whatever we're calling it now. But
Right.
so what's that look like for you, and who do you really attract, and how do you go out and find these people?
Yeah, so initially, I was working through very hyper local networks, working with any small business leader that felt like they, I could resonate with the idea of implementing growth strategies. What I, most of the clients I worked with were veterans, just because we have a veteran connection. But I think, part of it is I speak veteran, and so there's so many references I can pull from to create an illustration that clicks for a veteran, that might be harder for some who
So
haven't
funny that
served.
so funny
Yeah.
that you say that, because when Mark and I first got together, even though I wasn't in the military, Mark wasn't in the military, but I come from a long, long lineage of
Sure.
military, and I
Sure.
wanted to go. My vision held me back from not going into the military
Right.
that I wanted to do. And our thought was, let's cater to that. Let's go to that. And so
Mhm.
I have friends that are in law enforcement. I have friends that are
Right.
in retired firefighters and that are currently firefighters. And I talked to each segment of them because we felt like that's an area that really needs help. And thankfully for you, you're in that
Mhm.
space. And so each one of them came back and said, Dwayne,
Yeah.
that's all fine and good. You have that heart, but you don't speak that language. You don't,
Yeah.
you'd be chasing an avatar that they
Yeah.
don't feel comfortable enough for
Yeah.
you. Your
Yeah.
avatar is the guy or gal that's 40 to 65 that is transitioning from business and
Hmm.
that they're leaving corporate America and want to do something on their own, or they're that soccer mom. And
Hmm.
so we struggled with that initially
Hmm.
because we had a heartfelt of an area that needed to be touched. And
Yeah.
we looked at our business and said,
Right.
we can't go down that road.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Hence Huddle for Success. And we work with a lot of people that have sports backgrounds
Right.
and business
Right.
backgrounds and sales backgrounds.
That makes sense.
And that's up our alley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we really appreciate number one, your service and working
Yes.
with us with
Right.
service
Right.
people coming
Right.
out because my dad was in the military too. And
Yeah.
yeah, we
Yeah.
appreciate it.
So I think it's, I mean, like I said, it's just where I feel comfortable, honestly,
Yeah.
right? So it doesn't, I have clients that aren't veterans, but they know me and they know that's kind of my frame of reference, and we work together to find common language and make sure that we're, not I'm not using jargon that they're not familiar with,
Certain
but
code.
again, a lot of them are what I would call close affiliated, or
Yes.
either grew up, with a
Yeah.
father or mother or somebody who's
They get
military.
it.
Yep.
But yeah, so I think it's like I said, it's part of just it's natural for us to connect to each other as veterans with shared experiences and just the desire to help.
Absolutely.
I've been through the transition, so
Twice.
anybody going through the transition, I want to
Yeah.
help, and I don't think there's a magic pill to that. I just think that talking through it and walking through it, I found helps us to, a lot of it is just you just don't know what you don't know.
Mm.
Coming out of the military, you've been indoctrinated. I mean, really, really
Yeah.
indoctrinated. The language you use, the way things are done, it's just so isolating to come out and can be intimidating. On the one hand, I always felt like I could help anybody. I could help any organization. Just plug me in, give me a job, let me go, but I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know what that meant or what that role might look like or what it would be called, to be honest,
Hmm.
And so it took me a lot of time to research and understand, like, what is that, right? And so, like, just an example of, in the military, a logistics officer or supply officer is here in the organization, right? Like it's a part of the N codes or the S codes, depending on the organization. But operations is always here, right? So everybody supports operations. Well, in business, I bring operational experience. I'm an operations officer, right? But that is foreign. You would never say that. You don't, and you
Right,
don't
right,
see yourself that way
right.
necessarily, right? But if you're managing people, time, schedules, projects,
Yep.
logistics, like you're a business operations manager, right?
No
Yes.
question.
And
Exactly.
so that's just one example of how we don't speak the language. And project management is another one. I don't have my PMP, But did I do project management for 30 years?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. Managing people, time, processes, schedules, resources, money,
sure. Yeah.
right? Uh,
and in larger amounts than most other
right,
people.
right. In very large amounts, in global, with
Yes.
global logistics.
Yeah.
And so it's just, understanding that. But then there's also the piece of knowing, would you would you want to do that? Right? What does that job actually look and feel like in an organization? You have no clue. Where we come from, like it's just so foreign to say, hey, what do you want? Right? Because you also have to answer that question, which is very tucked down inside of 30 years of, you know, of just
I'm
patterns and habits and
I'm guessing none of your commanding officers ever asked you what you really wanted.
oh yeah, right. Yeah. No,
You know.
no, it's not something we talk a lot about,
Yeah.
"Oh, what do you want to do?" Even my path into the military, wasn't at all based on what I wanted. It was kind of what I got,
Right.
and
Yeah.
taking advantage of the opportunities you got. And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
Well,
thinking about that, a good book I reference is What Color is Your Parachute?
Yep.
If you've ever heard of that. But
Yep.
it's a really good book on that process of just being reflective, introspective, and what kind of things do I enjoy? And what do I enjoy being around people more than I enjoy processes? And all of that discovery is huge. Uh,
so so let's talk a little bit about your nonprofit that
sure.
you're developing. Yeah.
Yeah, so again, I want to help veterans, but I don't want to charge veterans. It's kind of where I found myself really struggling with the business concept. Like, I want to talk to somebody who's transitioning, but I don't want to charge somebody who's like I never felt like that was a good fit for me. But in a nonprofit structure, it kind of answers that and provides a solution, which is we raise money to pay for my services to help the veterans they actually get something else out of it. And so I came up with a structure targeting initially single parent veterans, because there's a need there that's very
That.
specific, that says, hey, you're transitioning and you want to start a business. You need some additional help, right? So you need the things there's several nonprofits out there to help veterans start a business. Although my program is going to be a little different. We'll see, what the results are. Hopefully, they're a little more productive, but we want to provide you with that childcare support while you're getting the training you need to launch a business, which is why it has to kind of be start hyper local. So we're going to start here in the greater Charlotte area, and have a 12-week cohort twice a week, and then 3 Saturdays during that period. So, and the Saturdays will be kind of our bigger workshop days with guest speakers and networking opportunities, so that again, as you start, you've got some other people that you can network with and gain some traction depending on where you want to go with your business.
Yeah,
But
sure.
the concept is, we'll walk you through some basic 101 business 101 concepts, and then give you the opportunity to put your proposal forward and get lots of feedback on it. And then we'll give you the tools to actually start launching that business with a website, social media tools, and coaching, and basically a $3,500 check once you graduate to basically start because you're going to start marketing, right? You got to start getting your name out there. You got to start getting your business out there. So So that's the idea, and we're going to pay you a stipend while you're in class just to kind of help offset, you know, the cost of you got to pay rent and things you might need to take some time off of work, or you might need to take time off your second job if you're working too or something to attend the course. So small stipend there, childcare provided. And then, we'll launch you again. I'm working with a software company who has that social media program developed, and I'll help with their website build. And so they'll also get a free year of that social media app,
That's awesome.
which
Yes.
helps you post your content. It's AI enabled, helps you create content, post it on your socials, do blog posts, the whole 9 yards, so that you're, really getting a leg up in the start of your business and promoting. Because we've experienced it ourselves, and it's really difficult to go from zero to to known
Right.
with your
Yeah.
business in the start. So uh,
Awesome.
Yes,
so
that's
the program
fantastic.
is called Veteran Parent Project, and there is a loose website already up. I'm kind of still working on that as we finalize things. But right now we're just in the initial phases of looking for board members if anyone's interested, and then also business owners that we would reach out to once we start fundraising. Anybody that wants to support. And our goal is to have as many community business owners as we can involved in the program, so that there's opportunity to hire, or there's an opportunity to work with or support as much as possible, because the goal is a lot of what's out there now is they're kind of incubators, if you will, business incubators.
Right.
But when you finish, you're still kind of on your own, and we wanted to make sure that people felt like they had a good leg up and a network to work with to launch their business.
Awesome. So, how's the best way for somebody to reach you for not only that, but also if they want to talk to you about your coaching?
Yeah, so the website is mastergrowthstrategies.com, and my company is called Leaders Edge Consulting. But Master Growth Strategies is the book that's available on the website, free to download, that goes through the 6 different growth strategies that I use as a template for working with small business owners.
Awesome.
Yes.
Mark, do you have anything?
No, just, Jim, thank you so much for what you're doing for veterans, because that really truly does need to be done. And thank you for your service. And
Yeah, absolutely.
thanks for coming on and sharing your story with our listeners. We really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity,
Yeah.
and look forward to working with you on some more projects
Yes.
in the future.
Absolutely. Any questions you have for us?
Any advice that you might offer?
Mark?
Keep your vision close and look at it every day. I'm sure that's what you tell your clients, and just,
Yeah,
that that the dream will become reality.
right.
Yes.
I would say
Appreciate
the
it.
best advice is never lose that dream.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because, at a young age, we're all taught to, as little kids, to dream and
yeah,
to reach for the stars and to hope. And, as we grow older, we quit dreaming.
yeah,
We quit living that fantasy of this
yeah.
is what I really want. And
Right.
so many people don't dream. They live in a grind. Again, you talked about not being able to lift their head. They can't see over the dash. And
Yeah,
when you can't keep that vision or that dream alive within you, well, then you start veering. Your vision becomes unclear. Your now goal becomes not so much a reality, it becomes more of a chore to where you
yeah,
can't accomplish it. So
yeah,
I would tell you, and I'm sure I don't need to, but continue to dream and live that fantasy. And obviously your vision is huge, and I appreciate you and your service and what you do, not only for veterans, but also people that need help that really can't help themselves.
Right. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah, it's easy to get beat down by, just reality,
No
right?
question.
And kind of lose sight. So
Yep.
that's great. Thanks a lot.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. So we appreciate you, the listener, for tuning in to Huddle for Success podcast. Also, join us every Wednesday and Friday as we come to you with a huddle up session with a quick mindful thought, last anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. Like, share, leave a comment. And with that being said, stay huddled up.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Huddle for Success. If you found it helpful and want to support others on their journey, share this podcast, leave us a rating, and drop your thoughts in the comments. We'll see you next week on Huddle for Success. Stay huddled up.